I am not in my office today to do this. Can you tell? I thought that since it's still a nice day outside and it's not too hot and it's not too cold, it might be nice to have story time outside today. At first, I thought that I might do story time out underneath one of my trees, but it looks like it might rain, and I would not want to get my ukulele wet or my camera wet, so up on my porch we'll have to do. It's still a nice change, isn't it? It's nice to get outside and get some sunshine, even if it might turn into rain. So, here we go. Clap your hands if you love stories. Clap your hands, I know you do. I'm so glad that we could be together. Glad to share a story time with you. Okay, our first story today is about a crow. Do you know what sound a crow makes? Can you make a crow noise? Caw, caw. I think we had some crows out here earlier today. Anyway, this particular crow was really thirsty. He had flown all over the place looking for some water to drink because it had been kind of dry, and some of the lakes and streams and things that he normally would drink at, he couldn't find anything that had enough water for him, and it was a hot day. So he flew over houses and fields and trees looking for somewhere where he could get a really, really big drink. And after a while, he came to a farm. And it so happened that under one of the trees on the farm, the farmer had left a jar that had collected some water. Well, this looked like the best thing in the world to the crow. And so he hopped over and tried to poke his beak down into the water, but he couldn't reach it. He couldn't get deep enough to get to the water. And the neck of the jar was too narrow for him to fit his head. So as try as he would, he could not drink. And he thought about pushing at the jar until he could spill it onto the ground. But first, it's really hard to drink water that's spilled on the ground. And second, it was kind of a heavy jar for a bird to tip over. And third, it might break, and he didn't want to break the jar. And so he thought, and he thought, and he thought. Can you come up with any ideas? How would you drink from something like this if you couldn't reach the water, and you couldn't get your head inside, and you couldn't tip it, and you didn't have a straw because you're a crow? Well, this crow was particularly smart. A lot of crows are. And he noticed that sitting nearby, there was a whole big pile of rocks. A whole bunch of rocks. And he thought, finally he picked up the rock and started putting them into the water. And it took a while, because he could only pick up one at a time, right? But slowly, but surely, little by little, the more rocks that he put in, the higher the water got to the top of the jar, until finally he was able to reach his beak in and get a good long drink. Now this kind of story, remember we said it's called a fable, which means that it has a moral, something that we can learn from this. What do you think? What do you think we learn from something like this? Maybe that if we try really, really hard, we can accomplish some pretty amazing things. Maybe that sometimes the smarter way is better than the forceful way, tipping the jar over. You could probably come up with lots of different things that you can learn from that crow. Maybe even just that if it's hot outside, make sure you're drinking your water. Okay, let's do a finger play about birds. We're gonna count them, all right? Hold up one finger. This is the first little birdie. One little birdie chirped just so. Two little birdies sit in a row. Three little birdies wait for a worm. Four little birdies squirm, squirm, squirm. Five little birdies shiver with cold. Six little birdies sit up bold. Seven little birdies sing sweet, sweet, sweet. Eight little birdies sing tweet, tweet, tweet. Nine little birdies all learn to fly. 10 little birdies in the blue, blue sky. Good job. Tell me something. Are you really, really good at paying attention? Are you good at noticing things and remembering lots and lots of details? Well, our second story is about 3 boys who were really good at that. You see, there was a teacher in this story who had 3 boys, Adam, Aziz, and Amir. And they weren't very rich, but they were very happy and they loved each other. And one day, the father said, I'm afraid that someday when you guys are grown, I'm not going to have a lot of money or a lot of land to leave you guys. But if you go out now and learn and figure how to make your way in this world, I think that you'll be just fine. And so the boys decided they were going to go out and see if they were able to do that. And they traveled and traveled, and they observed lots of things. And the one thing they remembered that their father had taught them is to always use their eyes and to always use their minds and to pay attention to everything. They visited lots of cities, lots of little towns, and one day, as they were traveling along the road, they stumbled upon a merchant. They knew he was a merchant because he had lots of baskets, but he was sitting by the side of the road looking very, very sad. He had his hands all wrapped up in his curly black hair, and he just looked like he'd reached the end of his wits. And the boys went up to him and they said, "What is the matter? How can we help you?" And the merchant said, "Well, I don't know if you can. I've lost my best friend in the world, and I don't know where he went." And Adam said, "I am so, so sorry." And Aziz said, "That sounds really, really terrible." And Amir said, "Is there anything we can do?" And the merchant said, "I don't know. He's been my best friend since I was a little boy. We've never been apart." Now Adam was listening and thinking. And finally he said, "This best friend of yours, by any chance is he a camel? A brown camel?" And the merchant said, "Why, yes. How did you know that?" And Aziz said, "Now, this brown camel of yours, does he happen to have one bad leg on his right side? And he kind of walks with a little bit of a limp?" And the merchant said, "That's amazing. How did you know?" And Amir said, "And by any chance, is this camel blind in one eye?" And the merchant said, "Well, you must have seen my friend. Obviously, you saw him. So tell me, where is he?" And the brothers looked at each other and said, "We don't know. We've never seen him." And the merchant said, "Now hold on just one second. You just described him with all of those details. There's no way you've never seen him. You're lying to me. You probably stole my camel." And the boy said, No, of course we didn't. But the merchant wouldn't hear a word of it. He said, "That's it. I know that you stole my camel, and I'm going to take you before the judge. And he'll put you in jail if you don't give back my friend." Nothing the boys could say could make the merchant back down on his threat. And before they knew it, they were being stood up in front of the judge and accused. And the judge said, "All right," to the merchant. "So based on what you've told me, you're missing one camel, a brown camel, who is lame in his right hind leg and blind in his left eye. Is that correct?" And the merchant said, "Yes, that's right. That's my camel." And the judge said, "Furthermore, you've told me that these gentlemen here, these strangers, were able to list every one of those details, but they claim they've never seen this camel before. Is that right?" And the merchant, very angry, glaring, said, "That's exactly right." And the judge said, "I see. Adam, Aziz, Amir, what do you have to say for yourselves?" And first, Adam, the oldest, approached the judge's bench, and he said, "It's true, Your Honor. We have never seen the camel, but you see, our father was a very wise teacher, and he taught us to pay attention to every little detail that we happened to see. That's how we knew that the merchant was missing a camel, and we knew exactly what he looked like." And the judge says, "That's very interesting. But tell me, how did you know first that it was a camel that this merchant was missing, let alone a brown camel?" And Adam said, "Well, Your Honor, that's actually easy. When we got to the merchant, we noticed that all the grass on the ground next to him was squashed down. It was in the shape of a camel, so we knew that there had been one there. Furthermore, the merchant, his black robes were covered in brown hair, straight brown hair. And if you look, you see the merchant himself has curly black hair. So we knew that it couldn't be his hair all over his robes. It must have belonged to the camel." The judge said, "All right, I can see how you came to that. But what about the lame hind leg? How did you know about that?" This time Aziz came up to the judge, and he said, "Well, as we were walking along the dirt road before we got to the merchant, you see, we noticed an intriguing set of tracks in the dirt. They looked like they should have been made by something that had 4 hooves, a horse or a cow. But we only saw footprints from 3 of the hoofs. The 4th one seemed to just be dragging along in the dirt. So we knew that whatever we were following had 1 lame leg." The judge said, Fine, but what could have tipped you off that it was blind in 1 eye?" And now Amir came up to the bench, and he said, "You see, Your Honor, all along the sides of that road, there were green, lush trees and bushes. And all along the right side of the road, the grass and the bushes and the trees had been nibbled on, little bites all along the road. But the trees and the bushes and grass on the other side, nothing had been bitten out of them, almost like whatever was walking couldn't even see them. So that's how we knew it might have been blind on 1 side." Well, the judge looked at the brothers. He looked at the merchant, was about to say something, but the merchant spoke up and said, "No, that's all very fine. They might have guessed all of those things, but they might still just be plain old camel thieves. I demand that you give them a test to see if they really are that observant." The judge thought about it and finally said, "All right, we'll test the brothers." She leaned over and whispered to the court assistants. They ran out of the courtroom, and then they came back with a very large chest and put it down on the floor in front of the boys. And the judge said, "Now, there is something in this chest, 1 object. I want you to describe to me what is in this chest." And the boys huddled up together and talked to each other and thought, whispered. And finally, Adam came forward and said, "Your Honor, by our observations, the thing that is in that chest is small." And Aziz said, "And it's round." And Amir said, "And it's green. Therefore, it must be none other than," and they spoke up and said, an unripe apple." Now the judge told the clerks to open the chest, and there in the bottom of the chest was an apple that was still green and not quite ripe. And the judge said, "Very, very good, gentlemen. How did you know that?" And Adam said, "That was an easy one, actually. From the way your clerks looked when they were carrying that chest in, we could tell that it was not very heavy. Neither of them were having any difficulty at all carrying it, even though it could have held something really, really big. And when they set it on the ground, we heard something rolling around in there, from one end to the other." Then Aziz spoke up and he said, "We noticed also that the clerks, your assistants, their shoes are all covered in fresh grass clippings. And when we came into the courthouse today, we noticed that there was an orchard outside of the courthouse that they had just cut the grass in." And Amir spoke up and said, "And finally, at this time of year, apples aren't ripe yet. So instead of being big and red, all of the apples are small and green. So what else could it be except," and the judge said, "an unripe apple, of course. I declare this case dismissed." And then the merchant went up to the brothers and said that he was sorry that he had jumped to the wrong conclusion. And then when he left the courthouse and went back outside, what do you think he found? That's right, his camel. That old creature had wandered off in search of water, and by the time he came back, everything had finished. And as for the brothers, Adam, Aziz, and Amir decided to settle down in that city and became teachers, just like their father. And they helped their own students build up their ability to always pay attention and use their eyes and their minds. All right, I think for our song today, we need to get up and move our bodies. What do you think? Go ahead, stand up and get ready to use your entire body. It's easy, just do what I say, all right? Put your finger on your knee, on your knee. Put your finger on your knee, on your knee. Then turn yourself around, stamp your feet upon the ground and put your little finger on your knee. Put your finger on your chest, on your chest. Put your finger on your chest, on your chest. Then turn yourself around, stamp your feet upon the ground and put your little finger on your chest. Put your finger on your head, on your head. Put your finger on your head, on your head. Then turn yourself around, stamp your feet upon the ground and put your little finger on your head. Put your finger on your neck, on your neck. Put your finger on your neck, on your neck. Then turn yourself around, stamp your feet upon the ground and put your little finger on your neck. Put your finger on your toe, on your toe. Put your finger on your toe, on your toe. Then turn yourself around, stamp your feet upon the ground and put your little finger on your toe. Put your finger on your finger, on your finger. Put your finger on your finger, on your finger. Then turn yourself around, stamp your feet upon the ground and put your little finger on your finger. Put your finger on your back, on your back. Put your finger on your back, on your back. Then turn yourself around, stamp your feet upon the ground and put your little finger on your back. Put your finger on your hip, on your hip. Put your finger on your hip, on your hip. Then turn yourself around, stamp your feet upon the ground and put your little finger on your hip. Put your finger on your nose, on your nose. Put your finger on your nose, on your nose. Then turn yourself around, stamp your feet upon the ground and put your little finger on your nose. Back to your knee. Put your finger on your knee, on your knee. Put your finger on your knee, on your knee. Then turn yourself around, stamp your feet upon the ground and put your little finger on your knee. Good job, guys. I am really glad that you came outside with me today. It didn't rain after all. I guess I could record it under the tree. Maybe next time. Maybe next time I'll take you out further into my yard. Maybe next time we'll get some real birds into our story time, not just the ones in our story. But for now, let's everybody get a great big stretch, can we? Let me see you. Reach for the ceiling or the sky and touch the floor. Stand up again. Let's do some more. Touch your head. And now your knees. Up to your shoulders. Like this, you see. Reach for the ceiling. And touch the floor. That's all there is. There isn't any more. But I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.